Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October program of Danville Alamo Walnut Creek, AAUW. I welcome you all on behalf of our branch of the American Association of University Women. And as you know, probably, AAUW is this international organization since 1881, no less, with the purpose of advancing gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. Our Danville Alamo Walnut Creek branch is one of more than 1,000 local branches that participate in the AAUW efforts, working for gender equity, education, and advocacy. I wanted, before we start, to make sure you realize this is being recorded, and if you do not wish to show your face on video, just stop your video and you can enjoy the program audio only. We will also be taking questions in the chat feature as we go along. And so if you have questions as you go along, put them in the chat. And Monica Witt, who is my another co-host with Chris, will monitor the questions. And if they are appropriate to other parts of the program, we'll ask Laura and Erin to answer them as we go along, particularly in our discussion time, the second half of the program. You might be asking why we have a program on water. Well, as you know, we are focusing our education effort in our branch plan to hear from and talk with women finding solutions. That's going to be a thread through our programs this year, because last year we heard about a lot of problems. But this year we're finding women who are finding solutions. And we are having conversations with them on important topics. You might be asking why we're having a program tonight on water. After all, living in California, we all recognize water as our most valuable resource. When we have a lot of water, we really sort of forget about how critical it is. But when water is precious, it is always on our minds and in our work. 2021 is one of those precious times. With increasing effects of climate change affecting our daily lives, all it takes is one shutoff or one contamination effort or event to let worry take hold of us. This is when we need to hear from women finding solutions. So the program tonight has, I hope, something for all of you. Our goals are to sort of help us learn about the complexity of procuring, providing, and conserving drinking water in California. We hope we will become aware of the systems involved in that procurement, provision, and conserving of drinking water. And then for the second half of the program, really, we're going to hear from Laura and Erin about some of the things they're doing, particularly to advance our AAUW goals of gender equity, education, and leadership. And in many ways, both of these women are advocates as well. So they're working on all different parts of AAUW's mission. I'd like to introduce these two women to you first, and then they're going to work through those goals that I just mentioned. First, I'd like to introduce Laura Johnson. As a licensed engineer with over 30 years in the water, wastewater, and solid waste industries, Laura has worked in both the private and public sectors, engaged in public policy, master planning, capital improvement program development and implementation, operations, and construction management. That is a toolbox of all kinds of different skills. Laura currently manages EBMUD, the East Bay Municipal Utility District's pipeline rebuild construction team, a 225-person infrastructure renewal division tasked with using innovation and technology. She has decades of experience with public policy development, strategic planning, budget management, project management, and personnel development. She served as a general manager of a recycled water joint powers authority. I think she's going to talk with us about that tonight. She's chaired multiple state and national water industry projects and associations, and she is a well-published technical author. Laura has a Bachelor of Science from University of California, Berkeley in civil engineering and is a California registered professional civil engineer. And then I'd like to introduce Erin Mackey. Erin is the National Drinking Water Technical Innovation Leader. How about that one? I'll say it again. National Drinking Water Technical.
Yeah.
National Drinking Water Technical Innovation Leader for a company, a huge consulting company called Brown and Caldwell. She has over 25 years of engineering experience in a wide range of drinking water and potable reuse treatment and water quality projects, working with water utilities in California and around the country. Erin has a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science and Engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which we just heard a little bit about, and perhaps she'll get into that later on, and an MS and a PhD in Environmental Science and Engineering from Rice University. So please help me welcome Laura and Erin, and I believe that Erin is going to start us out with a big, broad picture of our water situation.
Okay. Thank you, Betty. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, and then I'm going to put it in mode. Yep, I know participants can see my screen, and then I keep it. Okay, here we go. So, oh, the chat is showing up. So if you, whoops, sorry. If you want to put questions as we go, I'll try to pick them up in the chat. And I just thought I would start with just a few facts about water. We'll start kind of out at the globe, and we'll zoom into California in just a few slides. So this is just a laundry list of facts from the Bureau of Reclamation. A lot, I think we probably are very familiar with a 95%, if not all of it, right? We know that water covers about 70% of the Earth's surface. It's a lot of water. So 326 million cubic miles of water. It's a lot of water. But most of it is in the ocean. About 3% of the Earth's water is fresh. And I don't know, I always look for these kinds of stats. I don't know if you're as familiar with them as me, but so if 3% of the water is fresh, 2.5% of that is just not available. So we have only about 0.5% of the Earth's water. Of this 326 million cubic miles of water is available that's fresh. Which, if the world's water supply, I thought this was kind of an interesting way to look at it. Like, what does that really mean? If it were only 100 liters, so it's 26 gallons of water was, if you boiled it down to that, our usable water supply of fresh water would be about 1/2 teaspoon. So it's a really small fraction. So in reality, this really amounts to an average of 2.2 million gallons for each person on Earth. So if you averaged it out, if we had this to say, in theory, we had rights to every drop of water, right? But we know that we have to share that with our ecosystem to, and it also depends on where you live. So while there is a fair, good bit of a lot of water available in terms of total volume per person, there's a lot of competing interests for it, and it's not always in proximity to us. So, we deal a lot, as everyone is familiar in California, with a lot of water supply pressures. Okay, so there's a lot of really nice, I just got this from EPA there's a lot of nice graphics and stats out there from EPA and other federal agencies on water use in the US. So where does our water go? About 8% is for domestic use, about a third goes to agriculture, and about 60% to industry. So, you know, in terms of volume, over 600 gallons per person per day in the US is diverted for farm irrigation and natural aquatic sources. And then as far as, you know, where do we get our water? More than half the people in the US get their water from groundwater. And then if you look across like water utilities who's serving water, you know, there are thousands of water utilities across the US. I think as small systems, there's about 3,000. Memory serves correct. But the bulk of us, right, generally these 3,000 small systems serve very small populations. So most people are on large water systems that serve large numbers of people, like East Bay Mud. So coming to California, what's going on in the state? So as we're all painfully aware, you know, we're in a very a historic drought. I think the last 2 years have been the driest 2 years on record. And at this point, you know, most of the state is in an extreme drought condition. And even down south here, the least drought, the entire state is in a drought condition, and moderate drought is only true for the small sliver on the bottom, and most of us are in the red or the dark red regions of extreme drought. So certainly a lot of concern about that, looking a lot at water resources in the industry discussion, and certainly amongst the public as well. And anything, I would always just advocate, anything and everything you can do to conserve water is good. And everybody doing their part really helps make a difference. So a natural question might be, did the weekend's atmospheric river take us out of the drought, right? So we remember, you know, we have these atmospheric rivers, you know, river came, and we were just talking about how it just really drowned us. You know, and it was, you know, San Jose got as much water last weekend as they'd had, more than they'd had the previous year. San Francisco set a record, I think, that they hadn't, that, you know, went back to the 1850s. You know, Marin got like 14 inches. It's just been a record amount of rain in a lot of places right here locally. So we did get a lot of rain. Trees are very happy. I know my trees are super happy now. And I'm guessing water system's probably happy that my irrigation system is off, since we need to conserve. But did it make a difference? Not really. We need a lot more. So I actually went this morning and just looked to see anecdotally what some of the reports are. So, you know, like here, Lake Oroville went up 16 feet from just that one rainstorm, which is a lot of water, but this is a huge reservoir, right? And so it really only increased its total stores about 2%. So we're going to need, so one, we need a lot more of precipitation of these rainfall events. One, you know, this certainly, it's very good to have one, but it's just kind of a start. For us to get back to normal, we'd need like 7 atmospheric rivers to come through this year to make up for the last 2 years. But the other part that's really important for California is really that snow melt and that slow release of water in, you know, so that we can grab it and funnel a large fraction of it into the reservoirs in the spring. Also is really important part of the cycle. So that's just kind of a and will we get, is it likely that we will get more atmospheric rivers? So my understanding is, and Laura, you might be able to weigh in on this as well. I think we get to, the typical one is like 2 to 3 per year on average. So statistically, we should expect it's likely for us to get at least 1 or 2 more of these types of atmospheric rivers over this rainy season. But at the end of the day, we don't really know. We're in a La Nina situation, which can mean sometimes less precipitation. You know, we got a long way to go. So I'm certainly hopeful for at least 2 more. I would like to have 3 or 4 if I had my way, and more gentle, spread out over time. But we'll see. So And that's really all I had. I don't know if we wanted to take a few minutes if anybody had any other questions about sort of water in general that we could answer, or we can move on to Laura's presentation. Oh, I'd never heard the term atmospheric river before this weekend. Is it something new? So no, I'm not, actually, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how long it's been in the lexicon, but certainly when I first moved, so I first moved to California in 2011 in March, and that was the March that it rained like every day. And I was like, wow, it rains a lot here in March, because I came from Idaho, which is like, it's very similar. I mean, it gets colder, but it's very similar, you know, for the more the rainy, you know, having a rainy season and then it dry for a very long period of time. And so I just thought, oh, it rains here so much. And they're like, no, it's these atmospheric rivers coming through. So I think that's been, it's been, you know, they've been meteorologists, I think, have been following it for quite a while, but I really think it's since we gotten into these droughts and it really becoming like our last drought, you know, the 2015 to 2018 drought, it starts to blur for me, honestly. I started seeing it talked about a lot more. So I think it's only recently being discussed in great detail in the popular media. I don't know, Laura, would you add anything to that?
I think you covered it well, Erin.
Yeah, and it basically means that like these you know, the way that it sort of creates these large, really heavy streams of water, and then the jet stream brings it over land, and then it really becomes, it's like a river of water. So, you know, if we looked at, if you look at the, like, you can go to NOAA, actually, I Googled it today, and you can call up yesterday, and it shows you like just a line, and it's basically like a long series of storms. They're very heavy pouring rain down, so it acts kind of like a river.
Thanks, Erin. Why don't we then start sifting a little more and funneling down, and Laura will give us more a regional picture.
So I've got a message: host disabled participant screen sharing. I think you have to turn it back on, right?
Okay, now you're in, girl.
Excellent. All right. Can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to bring it down. Shoot. Okay, hang on one sec. There's something weird going on here.
You're going through the screens now. They look great.
I know, but I didn't want to. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing. Let me try this again. This is very weird. Okay. Slideshow. Hang on one second here. All right. So while I'm messing around with this, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's going on in the Bay Area. And I think we got it. Is it up?
It is.
Looks good. All right. So I'm going to take it from Erin's worldwide view, and she brought it to California. And now I'm going to talk a little about where we live and what's going on. So when any kind of water agency, and I think California has been really on the cutting edge of planning for the long term, there's a lot of different tentacles to what's looked at. So there's all these different pieces that I'm going to touch on that certainly East Bay Mud is in the middle of, but I think, you know, most of the water agencies in our state are doing these things. So the first thing is the state requires that every 5 years, every water utility develop an urban water management plan. And it has to be basically a comprehensive document. We get data through ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments, the cities. They are projecting their population growth. And we take that number and then we have an obligation to figure out how we are going to meet the needs of what the cities are planning and the existing residents. It certainly includes working around, looking at shortages, and there's a portfolio diversification that certainly adds reliability. If anyone is interested, our plan is at that website. It's on the East Bay Mud website. You can look it up. It's a pretty comprehensive document. It is certainly available to the public. So I'm going to just touch on some things that we've been doing on the long-term water supply investments, conservation, recycled, of which I personally had a lot to do with. Now I'm pretty involved in reducing water loss. I'm going to talk in detail about each of these. And then the regional partnership piece is expanding to a really exciting level that is bringing in all the local water agencies, a lot of the local governments, the state, the feds. I'll talk about that in a minute. That picture, if you're interested, is our Pardee Reservoir. That is our main source of supply for East Bay Mud. We serve about 1.4 million customers in both Alameda and Contra Costa counties. So that is the snow melt that Erin was talking about. So long-term investments, we have spent over, $900 million over 50 years planning for the long term. Our Freeport water supply actually just kicked in during the beginning of this drought a couple years ago. I think that was in litigation for about 30 years, and we're only allowed to tap into that water when our own water supplies go below a certain level. And the minute we take one drop out of it, and this was a 30-year negotiation because I think water is gold in California, and so you have to get someone to sell you their water rights. But we pay about $1 million to just activate that contract when we want to use it. And then from there, of course, we have to build the facilities, and this is where all the civil engineers are coming in, both on the negotiations, right? What's the cost of the project? What kind of treatment would be required? These are all STEM careers for women, of which these pieces I've been involved in. And then how much money does it cost to pump it from the Sacramento River into our service area? So there's energy costs and pumping plants and pipelines. These pictures I thought many would really enjoy. That's the Lafayette Reservoir. I think many may have gone and walks around the reservoir. The last severe drought was 1976, and this is before there were a lot of water supply reliability planning efforts. So at that point in time, if the snow melt wasn't there, we didn't have water. And if you've been to the reservoir, that's that tower, and we actually use it to monitor water quality and temperature. The picture to the right is a picture that was taken a couple weeks ago. This is actually before the massive rain. So anyway, that's just a perspective. There's been a lot of progress. Conservation is certainly part of the equation. I think this gets, really close to home. There's a lot of resources on East Bay Mud's website for each and every one of us on things that we can do. And here's a list of different things. There's a home survey kit and audits. There's a rebate program if you convert grass to, the drought resistant, non-water consuming type landscaping. There's a book we sell. We work certainly with all the nurseries. And then there's community events, and there's a lot of customer surveys and education outreaches. So again, there's a whole career in the water conservation industry at this point. The next piece, recycled water. So when I came to East Bay Mud, I actually was in consulting, and I was managing a big part of a large company's recycled water program. I chaired a national committee. We published some guidelines, some books. And if you're talking about recycled water, it's kind of interesting. It truly attracted, a disproportionate number of women. And I think I'm back to Betty's theme for our chapter for this year. This took a lot of problem solving. And I think the women that got into it, number one, it was innovative. It was out of the box. You had to figure out how to write regulations. What are the rules? What can you use it for safely? What level of treatment for what kind of application? And I think part of what I found wonderful about that niche, and I know, Betty, you've got questions we're going to talk about, it was a first space where I was surrounded by women. It was probably a 50-50, and that was not true in the beginning of my career at all. So again, I think women are good at collaboration. They were good at the innovative thinking. They are good communicators. And there was a lot of exciting things that developed. I then went to East Bay Mud to manage their recycled water program, and obviously started kicking off this 9 million gallons a year. We're basically taking wastewater out of a number of treatment plants. Only one is run by East Bay Mud. So there were collaborative relationships that we had to negotiate with other water agencies to actually use this water resource. If you remember the water cycle, that the drop never goes away, it keeps moving around and it gets attached and contaminated with this or that. But there's a lot of technology, membrane technology primarily, that has developed. And recycled water was one of the first applications in the Bay Area. There is discussions right now about desalination using reverse osmosis to do a regional project. Southern California is a lot further ahead than we are on that. The challenge there is, what do you do with the salt you pull out? So anyway, the goal at East Bay Mud is 20 million gallons. The target uses is really landscaping. We just converted, there was a press release last week that we converted the second 9 holes of the golf course in San Ramon over to recycled water. The Blackhawk Country Club uses it. And the piece it offers is it's a much more reliable source. In a drought, you still have wastewater that you can treat and deliver for these uses. Our other big application is the Chevron refinery. It takes about 4 million gallons a day, and they use it in their cooling towers. So that's another really fabulous, way to shore up our water supply. Reducing water loss, and this is a piece that I'm heavily involved in now. And I should give you one other thing. This is what Betty touched on. One of the things I had, there was a period also that I was a general manager for the DURWA, Dublin San Ramon Services District, East Bay Mud Joint Powers Authority. This was the other piece that I found in my career. I have run into a lot more women earlier that were actually on elected boards. So I would go in, the whole staff was like engineering. When I was the DURWA general manager, I was the only female anywhere to be seen, but my board was a 50-50 split, men and women. And so again, policy, innovative thinking, problem solving. And I even look at the East Bay Mud Board for decades. There's been a lot of women in it long before they integrated the staff with that many women. I worked at the city of Livermore. It was the same thing. Our council had a lot of women. So kind of neat. They were leading the pack, but then it's like, how do you bring staff along? And those are things we're going to talk about, I think, in Betty's questions. But anyway, the main thing I'm doing right now is this water loss piece. So my group actually, I have 20 crews, and we are replacing 20 miles of pipe every year. We may be in front of your street. My counterpart deals with the main, the leak repairs. I deal with the planned capital projects. This picture though, and we have about 1,000 leaks a year. We have 4,200 miles of pipe. This was a break in front of the Rancho Romero School in Alamo about a month ago. It was all over the news. If you saw, great pictures of the flooding. And what happened here is we had our 8-inch pipe separate at the joint from a 24-inch main. So we had 2 pipes and everything went underwater, and it was some good photography. Let's just put it that way. But this is all part of what we're trying to take care of. So it's kind of a toolbox approach here too. We're doing the pipe replacement. That's about $2.5 million a mile. It's a lot of money. We're trying to do advanced leak detection, and we're working with a number of startups to use machine learning to predict failures so that we replace the right pipe. Every segment of pipe has a grade A through F, and we're targeting the D and F pipes. That's the innovation. So lots of machine learning, new technology. We've got partnerships that have been really exciting with UC Berkeley and Cornell. Cornell had this premier pipe material testing lab. It now just got transported to the Richmond campus of UC Berkeley. We are working on bringing in other water agencies and industries. And anyway, it's going to be very exciting. And the idea is to advance technology in the water industry. This is the last piece. This is the collaborative projects. This is really exciting. This has about 30 plus different organizations involved at the moment and growing. Las Vaqueras is owned by Contra Costa Water District, and they do serve a chunk of Contra Costa County. Some of you may live in their service area, and it's their main water storage. And what they are doing is they are working on a collaborative effort. It's essentially a dam, and if we raise the dam, there's a number of benefits that would come out of it. And a big one right now, front and center, is additional water storage for most of the water agencies in the area. So if you look at the graphic, it kind of shows how much additional, there's a phase 1 and a phase 2, right? So right now the storage is about 100,000 acre feet. It was built in 1998. Then in 2012, right, and another 160,000 acre feet was added because they raised the dam once before. And if you look at the addition on this phase in progress, that's 275,000 additional acre feet for the Bay Area. So it's significant. It's exciting, the collaboration. There's going to be a lot to do, but you will certainly hear more. But one of the benefits also is that there's going to be expanded recreational uses. Right now, they seed it with trout. You can rent a boat. They've got some great hiking trails. So all of those resources will be expanded. It will improve water quality. And again, the partnership is fabulous. Here's a piece, it's a lot of money. And so they're talking about 25% of this. Right now, they've secured over $200 million from the federal government for this one. So again, you can see the local and state participation. This other map in the corner is all the different agencies that are currently involved. So that's what's going on. My involvement has been a lot with policy. And then, as I mentioned, really the implementation, the boots on the ground is kind of what I'm doing at this point. And that's it. That's the end of this one. Would you like to discontinue my screen sharing for me? I think that was great, Christine. Thank you. So questions?
You wowed us, Laura.
Yay!
So interesting. What a job, or multiple jobs. Terrific. Thank you so much for telling us about our regional area. How about we go now to Erin, and she's going to tell us a little more about her work and how she is seeing her projects and what it means to do what she does.
So Betty, do you want to take some questions first, or you want to wait?
Why don't we go ahead and let Erin explain? She might have some answers for those questions. And then when we get to the questions, my questions, then we can take some more questions.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a consulting engineer. So how did I become one? I got out of my professor, my advisor, he worked for Malcolm Perney, which Laura will at least will know, a big consulting environmental consulting engineering firm before he became a professor, and he had a lot of connections, and it was time to graduate. I didn't want to be an academic. And so he helped me get connected with some folks to interview for a job. And that's how I became a consultant. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what I was doing, right? I'd been in school for a really long time. So my whole 20s, so just about. But at any rate, so consulting engineers. So I kind of think of us almost like a SWAT team. Is when so water utilities, right? They have a staff, and there's things that they do on a regular basis. But there are certain things too that you don't necessarily need someone full time to do. So for example, if you're going to design a new advanced water treatment plant, right? They are going to put in UV disinfection, that's one thing I work on, or potable reuse facility, right? You need design experts in that technology and in how to do that. But once you're done, you don't need them anymore, right? So you basically, so we're the people that come in when they have a problem that they need outside help with on some specific issue on a whole range of different things. Everything planning, different kinds of planning, water resources, source water quality protection. Then, I come into the plant and we can do conceptual design to detailed design, construction, help them with operations. Then you go outside that, now the water leaves the fence. So there's, pipelines, infrastructure, pump stations, storage reservoirs, water quality in the pipe, et cetera. So it covers this wide range of things. So we come in and help them with problems, and then when we're done, we go away. So my job essentially, what consultants do is you're spending hours, which is working on projects, or you're selling hours, is you're trying to win work. So it's a very, so it's almost kind of funny to me that all those eggheads, and then I went to Polytechnic Institute, we're all a bunch of nerds, and then we all have to go out and regularly talk to people and communicate and, exchange ideas, work with our clients. A lot of writing is involved. It's very technical. Like what I do is very technical, but it's also has a, like Laura was talking, she's very technical, but also has this huge collaboration, team building, communication piece is really essential to what we do. So like, for example, right now I'm working in Southern California on advanced, bringing a design to add advanced water treatment at a water utility for them to expand, to bring in some new water sources that need a little extra treatment, and integrating that into their plant. So that's detailed nuts and bolts design, but we're always looking for innovative solutions to try and, make the process work smoother, operate better, and, save on costs, be more efficient in construction, whatever. And, I'm just one little piece of the puzzle. Like for your average water treatment plant will turn out 1,500 pages of specifications and 100 pages of drawings. At least, depending on how big it is, right? It can have a real stack up. So that's a lot of information, and it sure as heck is not all in this brain. So it takes this whole team of people first just to create all that material. Then you get the vendors come in. Then you work with the construction people. So we're really always working as a team. So I spend a lot of time on phone calls and communicating, working with, as a senior person now, I'm working with younger staff and helping to train and mentor, as well as, execute work, proposals, and then actually doing the work and then talking to clients. So that's kind of, every day is different. I never know what it's going to bring. And there's always lots of interesting challenges to deal with. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks, Erin. Maybe Monica, do you want to ask some of the questions that are in the chat then?
Sure. There are a number of them. Can somebody comment on the John Muir Land Trust and the Contra Costa County Flood Control District levee breach that is happening on Friday and will refill the Pacheco Marsh from Suisun Bay? So this is a pretty specific question.
Well, I Googled it because I'm not familiar with that. So since I work within the water, my work primarily is within the water treatment plant. I'm not so much in water resources. We do have a large group in water resources, but I do know that that's a project that's been in development for a number of years. It looks like ecological restoration in San Francisco area. It says, a lot of, they did a lot of, biological studies, excavation of soil, preparing it, and are returning a large section of marshland to, ecological restoration to its original natural beauty, I assume. But it is cool is if you are interested in finding out more about that and watching the levee breach itself, which from the nerd side of me sounds really interesting, is they are going to have Joan, you can go, they're inviting the public so you can come out and watch it. And then you can also watch online, the drone video footage will be available as well. So you can go online and watch it. So it sounds pretty fun. But it's like it looks, a levee breach, like kind of like the demolition of a building. You watch it on TV and it's exciting, and they go, you hear the pop, 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 boom, building falls down. What you don't see is like the incredible planning and work that's been done ahead of time to prepare the building to fall down. So we won't see that, but it's kind of fun to watch it come to fruition.
Yeah. So here's a question that's much more of a high level question as opposed to a more specific. Is there a point at which California won't be able to support the population as we grow? And if so, when will that happen? Are we nearing that point?
You want me to take this one? So the interesting part is, the cities are responsible for planning, and they have to, there's a lot of state initiatives, a certain percent of lower income housing. They like this, walk to work kind of dense kind of community, low walking factors, things like that. The water industry is essentially responsible, and at some point, many of us hope this changes. We cannot say no to any growth that it happens within our service area, that we have an obligation to provide them water. One of the things, though, there is a lot of unincorporated areas that are not part of a sphere of influence for any water utility, and we are not forced to annex. So an example like eastern, the far eastern part of Danville, when that whole Doherty Valley was going on, they were begging to get annexed into the East Bay Mud service area. And we said no, because we said we don't have a water supply to go by. Nobody's selling their water. But the reality, and just on the other side of this, and if you go to Europe, what you see, desalination is an absolutely viable source that is available to us. We have an entire coastline. We have access to it. It is certainly controversial because there is a brine disposal, but there's also, it typically gets into the growth, no growth. That the people who don't want more growth are against the desalination because it accommodates building more. The people that are okay with the building are like, look at all the water, it's right there, and all you gotta do is remove the salts. And there is technology that is definitely tried and true. It's expensive. It consumes power, you have a brine disposal, but it's absolutely available. And I think I mentioned earlier, Southern California already has it up and running. They've used it for years. They've got another big plant that's under permitting. So, it's a little bit chicken and egg. Any state that is not, is inside of the country and doesn't have that access, that's a whole different question. But we've got access to the ocean.
So let's follow on from that. You mentioned that one of the big issues with desalination is where to put the salt. Can you talk about that a little bit? Where do other agencies, where does Southern California put the salt? What are some possible options for that?
So, certainly if you get a landfill that is willing and lined, you can dispose it in a landfill. A lot of it is what's the cost of trucking. So I'm going to make it up. If I have a desalination plant over in Marin, and you probably have all heard Marin is in a really bad crisis as far as water. They have not done nearly the planning, and I can tell you a story about that. 1976, when you saw that picture of the Lafayette Reservoir, they built a pipe across the Richmond Bridge and we had to give them water. How many years later is this? And guess what they're asking us to do again? So we're in the middle of working with them to build a pipe across the Richmond Bridge because they haven't done planning. The only good news is that they are involved in that Las Vaqueras expansion. But if you had to truck your brine from, say, Marin all the way to the Central Valley, there's a huge cost in that too, right? So where do you send it? How much does it cost to get it there? So there's options. It's money and politics.
So on that note, there is one question about the Las Vaqueras Reservoir. Could you describe it? Where is it? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's in central and eastern Contra Costa County. You can access it from Vasco Road. And again, it is solely owned and operated at this point by the Contra Costa Water District. So I know less about that than I could talk to you about Comanche and Pardee a lot. And there is recreational uses, the hiking trails. If you Google it, there are maps. You can rent boats. You can buy snacks when you're out there. You can get a fishing license. So it's pretty awesome. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, it's a great day trip for sure. It's really close and it's beautiful.
I know we used to hike there quite a bit when we lived in Pleasanton. We really enjoyed it.
Should we go on to the questions and see, and then Monica, can you hold on?
Sure, sounds good.
Holding on to some of those others. If they aren't answered, we can get to them at the end. But again, if anybody wants to put a question in the chats as we are going through these questions, we're now moving into an area where we're going to talk more about women in STEM and women in engineering. And the perspective that Erin and Laura have, they've begun to share with us. And this was new to me. Remember, we used to think there were no women engineers. And even in Laura and Erin's careers, they have seen more coming into, it's certainly the water industry, all those different parts of the water industry, but also into engineering. So that's what we're going to kind of get into, and how we can support those women and women in any kind of position when you get to the leadership that these women are in. So let's start with Laura for the first question. As engineers who are women, how has it been to come up in once what was a man's industry?
I want to start with number one is encouraging, and this is absolutely what we do, encouraging women that you actually can have a career in this area. And my personal story, I went to high school outside Chicago. The AAUW chapter in my area gave me a scholarship to help me pay for engineering school. And I think a big part of that was I had these women that were saying, you actually can do this. Where at the time, there was a lot of discouragement about that is just not a career women do. And this organization was messaging something very clearly different. So it was impactful to me, which is probably why I've been involved here, because it's a game changer. So it has certainly changed a lot. I'm really happy about it. I'll give you another one. I went for an interview with the city of Livermore, and this is quite a few years ago, and connected really well. I was getting a job in their engineering department, and the public works director says to me, you know, you're going to have to go meet the city manager. We've never had a female engineer before, and he wants to be sure he thinks she can work. I'm like, what is it?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. So anyway, it worked out fine. It was just, they weren't sure what to say to me and how to handle me, which was very strange, right? But I mean, the experience there was great. I had a lot of support. When I went from there into consulting, and I was with a, international company, Walnut Creek office, 120 professionals in the office. And there were 3 of us women out of 120. And of course, 100% of the clerks were women, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And again, it was like, and I have to be honest, I have 2 kids. At the time, I was a single mom, and the other 2 women did not have children. So there was a definite, it brought us together in a really, really close way. I just had lunch with one of those gals a couple of weeks ago. So, one of the things it did is it really forced you to figure out what you liked in the other women and figure out how to really support each other and have a cohort group. East Bay Mud, I'm going to fast forward on this one. When I first started, there weren't that many, but I think it was my first job where I felt like my gender was irrelevant. I really did. And I don't know if it's just a culture thing that there weren't that many women at the time. That has certainly changed. There's not a whole lot of women at my level, but we always had board members. We always had about 50% of our board members that were females. And I think there was a definite support message there. We've also done an amazing job. A lot of it is who is in leadership. And when we got a new engineering director, all of a sudden we have this huge feeder pool of women coming in at the entry level. They're moving up. They're now in supervisory positions. I mean, it really takes the top, bringing people along, creating the opportunities, get a feeder pool for those promotions. So my experience at work, there is probably 3 of us at my level as far as women in the technical manager positions, but it's this fabulous feeder pool. And we do things like we organize lunches and we have mentoring, and I organized some study sessions for the ladies that were studying for their engineering professional exam. So we do a lot. So it has really changed. And I think the key is you bring people up with you. You've got to.
Erin, how about you in consulting? Was your sort of trajectory the same?
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure a lot of it sounds very familiar. So I started out, I went to RPI, Polytechnic Institute, right? So the ratio my freshman year, 1988, was like 6-1, men to women at this Polytechnic Institute. So it was kind of, even then though, like you were very popular, but I would always be like, yeah, but don't take it personally. There's just, there's like not a lot of opportunities out there. You used to have to go down the hill to the nursing school to find more women. But, you know, and it's been really nice to see that shift over the years, you know. When I started in consulting, I mean, certainly in graduate school, you know, moving them from undergrad to grad school, you know, was definitely male dominated, but there were a reasonable number of women. I want to say we were about a third of you know, the students. And now, you know, if you look at the statistics and in some disciplines, it's half. Not as much, I think, in engineering, but you know, I think over time it's only growing. But when I started, right, I think there were about 20 engineers in the office, and I was the female engineer, and I was the first one to come in to this office. It was a fairly new office, but still, so I definitely was a lone ranger. And then especially when I had these young kids, because everybody had little kids or, you know, had children, but I was the only mom. And I was the only one who was also a caretaker, primary caregiver for my children. So that was an interesting change. But, you know, I'll certainly say, you know, as, you know, where I am now, you know, I see a lot of, certainly over time coming into consulting and just thinking about the people that I work with a lot of women. Our chief technical officer is a woman, you know, even in leadership, we do have a, you know, large number of women in our organization. And I think just over time, you know, and then as I look down the organization and like at each layer, you know, mid-level engineers and junior engineers is the proportion over time, you know, it's getting, you know, I guess it's, you know, it is kind of like a tree, right? I see more women percentage wise in each group until at the bottom, for some of our offices, you know, it's almost even. And it does vary, I think, from place to place, you know, and we are in California. So it's, you know, we might be a little bit ahead maybe of some other places, but you know, it's still like I see it really as like the trend of the future, even if we're ahead of some places that, you know, everything is changing. And, you know, I find it really encouraging. And I think a big part of that is like all of us, you know, are really kind of leaders in showing, you know, and showing other women that this is what a professional woman looks like, and you can be like this. And like, if they can see it, then they can become it, right? When, like Laura was talking about, you know, when she was young, you know, who else did you know and who was encouraging you? I had my mom who was like, you're going to do this. Like, okay, because, you know, and she didn't get her chance. She was interested in science and she didn't really have a chance, you know, in the early 70s. And so she was determined her daughter was going to have it. And that planted the idea in my head. Plus I'm stubborn. So, and then, you know, you tend to then find other people who will be encouraging. But I think now women, you know, are hopefully seeing more women in positions of leadership and in these jobs that they can do it too. And then it sort of just becomes normal that's, yeah, one of the jobs you can do. So I think, yeah, I'm very encouraged for the future.
Cool. Well, why don't the second question is really asking you to share, and let's start with you, Erin. A time or a project where you began to feel that you were regarded as competent and professional in your own work. And I recognize this could be generational, you know, just time-wise as you became more comfortable with the work. And but confidence and competence go together. And what was an example of where you felt that? Erin first.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know first. I think, you know, it wasn't long after I got out of school and was starting to work, you know, and so I got involved in UV disinfection. There weren't a lot in drinking water, right? It had been used in wastewater for quite a while in the US, but it was new really to the drinking water market, and started working on that early when it came, and so became one of the, you know, the experts, one of the few people, you know, working on this, was working with EPA, helping them develop some guidance and this and that. And so, you know, we started going to see clients, and people started asking me questions, well, what do you think we should do? And I was like, well, they mean me. Like, wow, they really, like, they're listening and they're interested, and like they want to know what I think, and they see me as, you know, as a colleague and competent, and that was very exciting.
Cool.
So,
how about you, Laura? Do you have an example?
I do. When I went to the city of Livermore, I started in the engineering department and moved over, and they promoted me to manage their utilities. And they have a water and a wastewater and a stormwater utility. And at the time, you guys remember, there's 2 laboratories out there, the Lawrence Livermore, the Sandia, and our council was almost 100%, we called them lab rats. You know, they were all people that worked at the lab. They loved technology, they loved piloting, they loved research. So we put this crazy proposal together to test, to pilot all these different membrane technologies. And again, this is a number of years ago. So we were, you know, RO, reverse osmosis, was already up and running, but we were testing nanofiltration and ultrafiltration and all this on the wastewater in order to get it approved by Department of Health Services for reuse, right? And I'll tell you something, we got to do crazy amounts of piloting for how big the city's whole utility is. And the council was so ecstatic, they sent me off on a speaking tour at all these different conferences and national, and Livermore is tiny. I'm just saying their treatment plant is like 8.5 million gallons. And, you know, that's like this in our world. So anyway, but it was crazy fun. And I really felt endorsed and supported. It certainly changed the trajectory of my career, because all of a sudden it led to that invitation to chair AAUW's, that's American Association of Waters, national committee, and be on this thing, and meant, you know, it was fabulous. So anyway, it was pretty fun, but pretty nutty. I'll just tell you, they were totally into the data.
But it really served as an entree for you into state and national activities and association work, which I think for many people in all kinds of work is important. When you talk with and work with others in those organizations or different kinds of pieces of your profession. So cool. Okay, so Laura, let's start with you for the next one. When have you had opportunities to recruit or mentor young women in your work? And what would you say to do?
I touched on a bit of what we're doing. I want to just put a plug in too. And I'm involved in this. East Bay Mud does have high school internship programs and college internship programs. Typically, they put apps up on our website. There's a way to apply December or January if anyone knows someone who might be interested. And there's also a junior ranger camp. I haven't been so involved in that. But, you know, we do a Take Your Daughters to Work Day every other year. I've been really involved in helping organize it. And they can either follow their parent and see what they do on a day in East Bay Mud, or there's certain tracks where they can go over the engineering department and they give them, you know, hands-on AutoCAD time, or you can go out and spend a day with the ranger and get the wildlife tours and learn about what they do, or the system water quality people, or, you know, they can come to my group. Sometimes they will have them putting pipes together, the construction component, and we literally set up pieces for them. We put them in a hard hat and a vest, and we give them the tools. And so that's been pretty awesome. And, you know, I think the big thing is to say, you can do this if you want to do it. And I think, Erin, you touched on that. If they see people that look like them that are doing it, it makes it more credible. But it is certainly a lot of fun.
Cool. Erin, any mentoring that you want to share?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly one thing kind of funny, I like to, you know, start small, right? Is so my son's middle school, well, they're they're grown out of school, but they, you know, they have a career day and everybody's parents can come if they want, and they set up tables in the gym and they shuttle all the kids through to at 6th to 8th grade. This is at Charlottewood Middle School in San Ramon Valley United School District. But, you know, they shuttle the kids around all the tables. And I remember the first year that my older son did it, I made this big thing on all the different kinds of engineering and said it, you know, and I brought it, you know, as long as I had a kid in this middle school, I just kept coming back. And so I wanted to start small, early, planting those little seeds and coming by, you know, especially for any girls that would come by, like, you can do it too. See, I'm doing it. So, you know, starting there, and then our, you know, our organization, it's really put together, the majority of these are, you know, by the rising, what we call rising professionals, some of our younger engineers. They do great stuff putting together some of these events to sponsor, you know, bringing high school kids, sometimes younger school kids into the office and showing them what we do and talking about all the different careers in water and trying to, you know, get them excited and interested. And, you know, I think it's always important for us, at least I feel personally, you know, standing up and participating where I can in those events to show them, you know, more senior, you know, that what you can be, you know, be in the future. You know, they see the young versions and then they need the older version. So
Great. I have to put a plug in, of course, for AAUW because we have 2 programs that our branch supports, Tech Trek. In fact, we lost Deborah Wexler just now. She's going to a California Tech Trek meeting, but this is for middle school girls, and it's a week-long science camp up in Sonoma State University. And our branch gets to select, last year, was it Monica, 10? I think 10 middle school girls. And that meeting those girls, I know Laura's done it and Chris, a number of us, and meeting those young women and seeing how positive they are about going into careers in science and math. It is really a trip. It feels so great to meet these young women and their parents and see how they are supported in their choices. It's really a cool thing that AAUW calls us to all do if we'd like. And certainly Laura has already been involved in that, but Erin, anytime you want, you're welcome to help us with Tech Track. And there's another program called Expanding Your Horizons, which is a 1-day or 2-day event. And that too has women in science talking with young girls about all kinds of careers. And it's an opportunity to really hook up with these young women who have all the possibilities in the world. Mm-hmm. So thanks, ladies. I have one more question, I believe. Tell us who will follow you in your work. This is kind of the longer term thinking that we're asking you about. How do you prepare others to do the work you do? And can you or have you made system change that will improve that following up or that following of you as you go on? Laura or Erin, I guess we'll go first on this one.
So yeah, so it's a strange, in some ways, you know, I guess I think everybody goes through the same thing when you suddenly find yourself and you're like, wait, when did I become one of the more senior people in the firm? When did that happen? That's when I got bangs. Maintain my youthful look. It's just hide it under my hair. But yeah, so, you know, I mean, I guess technically like the millennials, right? The next generation, if we want to put a label on the group, but, you know, the next generation of mid-level engineers, you know, coming up are going to be taking over for us. So, you know, it's been a big part of, you know, I think of our responsibilities is, you know, training the younger staff, you know, both technically in their technical expertise and helping them learn, but also starting to transition off to people managing projects, leading pursuits, working with clients, et cetera, and so, that next generation, is going to follow us. And, I think they're really bright, energetic, confident, group of people, which is great. So, if we want to take a specific angle, like for women and encouraging women in science and in leadership, I think one of the, sometimes I'll look, mentoring and coaching, some of the things that, women can often fall prey to, like, perfectionism, feeling a little afraid to speak your mind, feeling like you have to be the super expert in anything before you can even start to have an opinion, or not speaking up and pushing back when you disagree with something, or just, more taking up space is kind of how I think of it. And if I see that, I think having sometimes those conversations and just mentoring one-on-one as a leader. And really this can be for, and do a lot with women, but really for me, I think you can really do it with both sexes, is, helping and coaching people and helping and encouraging them to grow into that next level, and certainly, have we made system change? I think just the fact of our being here, if the previous generation was all, a lot more, let's say demographically similar, and just as there's more diversity, over the years. And so then it's people coming from different places, different types of people, we're all coming together, sharing our different perspectives, our different working styles. We're all doing our part to change it over time. It's not the same monolith that it was, when my mom was first starting out young, and then when I came into the business, and then now I think it's changed a huge amount. And a lot of it is, and I think too, firms too, I think also recognize the value of diversity. I know our company does, and really, do a lot to continue to expand, to help the institution and the companies grow too, and just their institutional forms to really foster and appreciate and create space for more diversity in our company and in our profession.
Does Brown and Caldwell have a leadership development program for?
Yeah, we do have leadership development program, and there's a lot of different systems you can pick, depending on what career track you're in. There's a whole progression path of what you want. There's a lot of opportunities for connecting with mentors,
Cool.
either in your line, if you want, we want similar. We have communities of practice too, like we do have one for women engineers, and it's open to everybody, but it's really talking a lot about those specific challenges that sometimes that we can run into as women, like, and just topics that we want to talk about, right? That really can cross both, like, being a working parent, dealing with perfectionism, any range of issues.
Cool. I for one can tell you, I never had that in the university or in the healthcare system.
Yeah.
We had to make our own women's groups that were often our coworkers, but it wasn't something that we had. And I'm really excited that you have that available to you. Erin, Laura, would you like to expand on that?
Sure. So I think Erin touched on a lot of really good points. We too have leadership development programs, and they're for people that want to become first-line supervisors. There's those that want to move up to mid-management. There's those, a different track for those that want to get into the senior management. We have a very generous tuition reimbursement program. And I think we really have this culture, and we preach it, to say we are hiring you. You got to have some basic skills, but we're hiring you for your aptitude and your ability to learn. And one of my great stories, I had somebody come in, they started as a high school dropout, they got a job in the trades. Through tuition reimbursement, they got their GED, an undergrad degree, went to law school, passed the bar, and ended up applying for one of our attorney jobs on our 9th floor. Is that a great story? I mean, and that's truly the culture that we're in. But I'm going to throw this out too. Another really important thing is your hiring decisions for both who you bring in. I touched on this earlier. And then who are you promoting? And are you mentoring them to make them successful? I do a lot of people can job shadow. The people under me, when I go on vacation, they do work out of class. They go to the meetings for me. All those things are preparing them to be ready to move up. So I think that's, a lot of it. We had a women's affinity group. It kind of dwindled. We're starting it back up again. Not sure what it's going to look like, but again, hiring decisions and then mentoring those people once they get in those jobs is really, really, and bringing women up with you, to me, is really huge. I have to tell you though, I'm in construction there. I've had a harder time selling many women to get into construction. So a lot love the design piece. They like, but the field. So I'm working on that. There's room for a lot more ladies, I'll tell you. And I'd like some company, more company. I have some.
And it's so fun. You get to go out every day in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, until it's pouring rain.
Yeah, but if you're working for EBMUD, you're going to have interest in field work, right? You would hope.
Even our engineers go out to job sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, anyway.
Cool. I think that you guys have given us so much very interesting information. Monica, did I miss some? I know I missed several questions. Are there any questions that might pertain to what they've just done with these conversations, or are there others outside that? You're muted, my dear. You're muted, Monica.
Yeah, sorry about that. So most of the questions are outside that general area. There's one that's so generally in the community. Do you in your jobs get involved in issues among specialists from different fields, environmentalists and farmers and ranchers and recreation managers, for example? So reaching outside of your own fields, but using your skills as communicators and as technical leaders to bring all of those people in the community together.
Jump in. I don't know if this is exactly answering that question, but we have a lot of interaction with almost every type of organization since we're providing water to them. I mean, we certainly have partnerships with East Bay Regional Park District. We rent land from them for some things we do. We have contracts with farmers for goats that graze some of our upcountry watershed for fire purposes. And, there's a lot of different, I guess, city and city council groups I'm going to the Alamo MAC next Tuesday night to talk about what we're doing to minimize our main breaks. So a lot of involvement with the community, that's for sure. I don't know if that answers your question exactly. The water supply pieces involve everybody, right? Because that gets down to, water rights. And the crazy part, before 1913, if you had property, you're homesteading, and there's a creek that runs through your yard or your property, especially Central Valley, you had unlimited access to as much water as you wanted. And if you completely dried up the creek, whoever was downstream from you had no water rights. In 1913, the State Water Resources Control Board was formed, and all of a sudden there became more rules around it. But, you hear a lot about farmers in the Central Valley, and some of them have unlimited access to water because their families homesteaded before that, or law kicked in. It's kind of interesting. So I don't know if that answers exactly that question.
But thank you. I mean, the point is really that you are a communicator with a huge number of different perspectives, and that the ability to do that is important to your success and the success of your organization.
And I think the fact that water is a public good, right? And EBMUD, for instance, is a public utility. I don't know, but I think they are resolved and required to have all this interaction and communication as well. Is that true, Laura?
Oh, yeah, and we have an elected board.
Right.
So, and it's by ward. If somebody's unhappy, they go to our board member.
Yeah.
And you hear about it.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked, here's a simple question. I think Carol Coburn, good to see you, my dear Carol, friend, new member. Besides Chevron, what are the big industries in the region that use water?
You know, there's a lot up in the Richmond area, right, where there's industrial manufacturing. In our service area, most have left. We used to have this huge tomato canning company that was in the south portion of our service area, but they actually relocated partly because of the cost of water. So there aren't a lot left, to be very honest with you. And if you look at the type of businesses you see, there's not a lot of sort of manufacturing type applications in our area.
Mm-hmm.
But high tech uses more water than you would think. Isn't that correct?
Right. And that's mostly South Bay, right?
Right.
We don't really have them here, but you're absolutely right. The chip manufacturing, all that.
And just cooling towers. Cooling towers take a lot of water. So if you can find a good reuse partnership with any data centers, places that use, have a lot, because all that information that we're madly sending around, and takes storage, and that storage creates a lot of heat, which has to be cooled. And then, of course, landscape irrigation, where there's opportunities to connect up purple pipe.
What's purple pipe?
So recycle water, so non-potable water goes through. So I think because it was the color that wasn't taken, went back and like, why did we come up with purple for purple pipe? But for the way to make sure it was clear that this was not potable water, they made the pipe purple.
Really?
So yeah, so some, like, is it potable reuse or purple pipe is what somebody will sometimes say, and what they mean is non-potable reuse, where it's reclaimed, treated effluent is then filtered and disinfected, and then it's like, it goes flushing toilets, going on lawns, being used in manufacturing, etc. Not for food, so not like. And, depending on the level of human contact, different levels of treatment. But yeah, purple pipe is.
So potable, I've always thought it meant drinkable, but that's not true.
No, potable is drinkable. So non-potable is purple pipe.
Ah, okay.
Purple pipe is only a wastewater origin. It's very specific. There's regulations.
Yeah.
Reason. So there's non-potable, like if you have a well, and there are wells around here, it may not be drinking water quality, but the regulation would not tell you to put that in purple pipe. The main reason for the color coding is you don't want people connecting the purple pipe with the potable water system, and all of a sudden you're drinking it, right? And if you look around here, I don't think there is any use at the moment that is residential, because the concern is you don't have commercial maintenance people. And somebody's Joe Gardner guy that might just take that recycled water and tie it into something that they shouldn't. So the Department of Health Services, right? There's a lot of concern under Title 22 about how you handle it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't take it home and don't connect your irrigation system that's connected to your potable water also to take like gray water out of your washing machine. We don't want that. That's a cross connection.
Chris Ritter, did they answer your question about any recourse to farmers who with unlimited water rights?
Is there any recourse that we have as other citizens in this scarce water environment?
So let me tell you what we had all hoped. Every time there's a severe drought.
I can't hear you. Can you?
Can't hear you, Laura.
Every time there's a severe drought, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
We all hope somebody will take this on with the legislative solution, because that's what it will take. But you're going to be fighting a lot of money, because their benefit there is just, you can't buy it these days, right? But it is a very frustrating component of our water rights situation right now. It feels very unfair.
Is it a large component? How much of the water do they control still by these
I mean, it's quite a bit. I don't know volume off the top of my head, but you know, our water situation would look quite different because they can pull as much as they want out of any flowing body that goes through, and some actually have access to, you know, the state system because of negotiated agreements, right? You want to build through my property, I want access, and I mean, at East Bay Mud, you think we own party, right? We have 37 different water rights contracts. And we own our own supply for the most part, but it's really complex and pretty convoluted, pretty goofy.
Yeah, was it the book, The Cadillac Desert, that
Mhm.
talked about those stories? Well, there's been many, many novels as well as nonfiction histories about water rights and people selling their water and making huge profits. Pulling up their orchards and their agriculture because it's much more profitable for them to sell their water. Yeah. Well, we're getting very close to 7:30 when is the end of our time together tonight, but I really want to thank Laura and Erin and Chris who did, and Monica, everybody who made this evening a very, very interesting one. We, on behalf of AAUW, we just are really thankful to you guys and to all of our participants for the good questions, the engagement. I might ask if you like this kind of conversation program, would you put either a reaction or something in the chat that says this is a good kind of format? It's something that I like a lot because we really can get questions and engagement from the audience. But if you like it, please tell us so in the chat. And then I think we have one event coming. We're hoping it's going to be November 15th, but we're still securing our speakers. We're going to be talking at your request about education, civics education, about what goes on in the schools to teach students and teachers right now about our government, our need for community engagement, our understanding of the public good, and what is the public good anyway? We just talked about one in terms of water, but there's another number of other public goods that we need to talk about and we need to teach our children about because we're all in this together. And as these resources get more and more scarce, we need to say, what is the community going to do about this public good? It's not something that individuals can really do alone. We need to use the public resources and public people to do. So that will be, I think, November 15th is a Monday evening. It's a different date. We had originally thought earlier in November, but that doesn't give us quite enough time between this meeting and the next. So we're aiming for November 15th. And as soon as we can secure our speakers for that, we will get the information, and there'll be another Zoom meeting, but we hope you can join us for a good conversation about civics education. And on behalf of all of us at AAUW, thank you for attending, and thank you again to our speakers. Night.
Good night.
Thank you.